Hi, I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment and music education. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow.
So, Kathryn, today's guest was obviously introduced to me by a former coworker, Sally Donnelly. We got to give her a big shout out for the amazing work she's doing. And Sally runs this teacher research club in my old school district in Arlington. And today's guest, Zach, was part of that. And my goodness, I am so glad that she made that connection. This was such an awesome conversation.
So wonderful. So good to hear like a general music example, even though you can apply it to really anything in music education. But yeah, it was really fun to listen to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because everything from his project was very relevant. And also just hearing how he really looked at the data, the research. Yeah. I feel like often we hear about that word research and data only coming from those in academia and higher ed, but to hear a practicing music educator put that into his practice as well was really neat.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're glad that you're joining us again today. Today we have the pleasure of talking with Zach Rush today. So Zach, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit and telling us about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Zach Rush, and I go by Mr. Z with the kids. I always thought that sounded a little more rock and roll as opposed to Mr. Rush. And then that just sounded like they needed to hurry up and get done. So I'm Mr. Z with the kids. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be talking to you guys about my teacher research project on culturally responsive practice in the music classroom, and then further sort of look at what we did this year, particularly in a music composition project that I did with third grade. That was really successful.
Awesome.
So tell us a little bit about like your background. What do you teach, or what have you taught? Things like that.
Yeah, so I started my career as a music educator right during the 2008-2009 recession. I had just graduated my undergraduate degree in music education, particularly vocal music education. And it was a weird time because I was in Nebraska at the time. School districts were defunding their music education programs. School districts were consolidating. I was in a particularly rural area of the United States in Nebraska. And an opportunity came about when I was working part-time at Starbucks, and I got introduced to international education. And so I talked to this random lady. She was really, really fun. She was just didn't fit the type of Nebraska, but I knew she had been places. She looked like she knew a lot of things, and I was inquisitive. And I said, well, you've lived all over the world. Tell me more. And she said, I taught overseas. I was an international school teacher. And so that was kind of the catalyst for me in my career, where I decided, okay, maybe I give it a go. And 7 months later, I ended up in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and I had my first year of teaching at the Universal American School in Dubai. I was a K-3 music teacher, and I taught about 600 kids at the time. I had 80 countries in my classroom represented. Wow. The instruction was in English, and it was an American and IB curriculum. And it was great because it kind of introduced me into, okay, what's really important about music here? And so I spent 5 years in Dubai. I got a job teaching after that, a music director position at the International School of Islamabad in Islamabad, Pakistan. It's a U.S. State Department school where I got to teach diplomat children. And that was a lot of fun, and exciting things happened with that, and got to expose me to a lot of great musical opportunities. And particularly, I got to teach all ages. So I got to do K-12 there, which was a really great experience. Went back to New York, got a second master's degree, and 2019, 2020, you know what happens. COVID happens and we went on lockdown. I finished my degree online and I panic applied and got a job teaching in Arlington County in Arlington, Virginia, right outside DC. And I am now a K-5 by choice music teacher. So kids in elementary school age kids specifically are my jam. That's where I find my passion. And that's the foundation where the love for music begins. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm in my 13th year of education, 12 years of teaching. 1 year I did during my master's program, I did do a bunch of sub jobs. And so I still count that. I got to see a lot of ways in which schools get to operate their music programs, both publicly and privately. But 13 years now, and I am making my way to Iowa City, where I will continue my love for music as an elementary school teacher there, but also be a little bit closer to my niece and nephew, Barrett and Nora, which I'm really excited about. So thank you guys for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course, that sounds like such an awesome path that you've taken. We've interviewed a couple different international teachers, and it's always great to hear their perspective, but then also to talk about, today's topic.
I think, I ran away from home a little bit, I would call it, but now I'm running towards home. But yeah, it's completely shaped who I am as an educator. It's really taught me the value of cultural competency. It's taught me the value of getting in there and making things relatable. And then also the value of student agency, which I want to talk to you guys about today. So I'm excited.
Yes. Awesome. Well, we, were connected through a mutual friend and colleague because, at one point in time, I also taught in Arlington and she shared that you were part of her teacher research program or a teacher research club, I think was what we called it at the time, and I was in it. So can you tell us about this teacher research idea? What is it and what motivated you to be a part of it?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't have a whole lot of what I didn't know what to expect initially going into teacher research, but I knew two things. Number one, I'm a teacher. Number two, I love research. I love the way research tells a story and that it can be backed up with evidence. We can measure it. And I wanted to, specifically, okay, what does this look like in a music classroom? Particularly, how can I use my craft and skill? Am I doing all the right things? Is my creative side and what I bring to my own teaching actually beneficial to my students? Are they learning? And then specifically, our push this year in teacher research was surrounding cultural competency and cultural responsive practices as educators. And so that all sounded really great. There's an added perk. You get all of your professional learning done in 1 year, and you don't have to spend any extra time outside of the school year. Workshops are great in the summer, but I got to use all of my summer for me. So that was wonderful. And it was an opportunity for me to really see and take a picture of what am I doing? Is it actually beneficial? And are my students learning what I want them to learn, particularly when it comes to their musicianship, but alongside learning some of those key cultural responsive things that we want all of our students to take away with them. Music is a vehicle that drives our emotions. It drives our passions. It drives our creative side. And I wanted that to be an opportunity for my students, particularly, to understand a little bit about the world around them, understand and know, we were in a very wealthy school district, and understand that there's a bigger world out there, and to understand, some of the challenges we face in humanity, particularly when it comes to some of these things that we've been talking about in education regarding people of color, and making sure that we have an idea and an understanding of how are we going to move forward, and can music be a vehicle and a tool for the betterment of people who we're serving. So that's kind of a preface of what's going on. It's kind of all over the place, but yeah, that teacher research was a great opportunity for me to find myself as an educator and see what, if I was doing, really brought about measurable and positive outcomes, particularly with my students and their musicianship too. There was lots of fun things to measure. So
that's awesome. Yeah. And was the program the same last year, where when I was part of it, you met monthly with your cohort, and
Yep.
discussed your questions, and was that
sure?
similar?
Yeah. So let me just describe it to you. We had about 4 or 5 people in my cohort. All of us decide on our thesis question, and I went through multiple stages of that question. But I wanted to focus specifically on what I thought was important. Number one, philosophically speaking, particularly for me, student agency will drive a successful music education program. Students who have choice, students who are able to create, to own a product that they are putting out there, one that is still of high quality, is hugely important to what I do as an educator, particularly in the music classroom. So I knew that was important. I wanted to do something along those lines. I knew that we're in a day and age of testing, and social studies is kind of disappearing. I hate to say it, but it is. I think a lot of education, well, let's just say, boards of education are really focused on testing, and they're focused on STEM research, and they're getting away from the creative side of things. And particularly the arts are really kind of in this weird opportunity, particularly with COVID. COVID really had an impact on that. How are we going to, make meaningful impact as music educators or as art teachers, etc.? But how are we also going to make it valid? And why are we still here? And why is it that we still need to drive student agency to be creative, and student agency to take over learning and drive learning to conceptually understand things? And so that was another part of the important part of that process. And then number 3, I needed something to do with grade 3 during civil rights unit for social studies. And so I thought this was a great opportunity. It was an easy plug. It was kind of cross-curricular in a way that, okay, if we only have 25 minutes dedicated to social studies every day in the classroom, why not bring it into the music classroom a little bit and drive some more of those things that we find important? And so that was kind of what drove me to this particular project.
And my understanding, because I haven't been through this before, I know you both have, but was this part of the district too? So like it is counting as some kind of PD?
Yep. So this qualified as professional learning opportunity and points for certification. And then it also, I know it could play into gifted and talented points as well. So the county's big on, making sure that we're always bettering and continuing our education in that regard. And so, so it was a great opportunity for me to get some professional development points towards recertification, and also understand and learn more about what is it that we're actually talking about and why is it important? What is this cultural responsiveness that we're talking about, particularly in the music classroom?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to stop and say, like, I love that, because I feel like you were like, I have this need of what am I going to do with 3rd grade and civil rights? I want to know about my instruction. I have to do these PD hours, and, and that all came together in something really meaningful for you. Like, that's awesome, PD.
And, I don't want to start it on this note, but I was in the classroom. It was during the pandemic. We were online, and a student of mine asked, "Who is Dr. Martin Luther King?" This student didn't know, A, anything about this man, let alone B, that we have a national holiday surrounding this man and his legacy. And I thought, okay, I think oftentimes we're in a music classroom, or we're in a classroom in general, and we think that things are learned, and we think that, children have this understanding and idea about all the things that we think and find important, notable people in history in particular. And it really struck me, because it was like, this student genuinely will not understand or know who this man was and what he did for civil rights until we teach the student. And I think I have a responsibility here, even as a music teacher. Mm-hmm. And so that got me thinking. And that was what kind of was the sort of foundation for my project. I said, okay, I know that I have a responsibility here. Music is such a great vehicle and tool to drive some of these things, about civil rights and, being a vehicle for people to emote and express himself in a safe way and in a positive way, or to promote change, through songs of protest. And that was kind of the foundation for this project. So that's
awesome.
That's where I'm at. It was awesome. It was a great opportunity. And particularly the project itself really showed some valuable data that I'm going to be using as I continue onward. And more projects like this.
Yeah. So now we want to know, like, what was the project in like with details?
Yeah.
What did your kids do?
Give us everything.
Yeah.
My definition of what's important in music education and in the classroom has definitely changed. I was one of those music kids. I was one of the choir, like leadership kids. I was in glee club, swing choir. I was the big guy for music. And, I thought, taking all of that with me, I wanted to be that music teacher that made music that for every child that I taught. And I got into my first year of teaching. I learned very quickly, this is not going to work. My expectation of children and what they need for music is not really working in the way that I thought it would. And, so that kind of, it changed my view on things in terms of, okay, what's actually important here? Music education is a vehicle and a tool specifically for those who are talented in music, as an opportunity for them to create and bring forward, great music, great artistry. But we've got about 90% of children where music is a place for them to call fun. It's a place for them to be safe. It's a place for them to express their emotions in a way that's healthy. And it's a place for them to understand the importance and the power that we have in music to bring people joy and bring people awareness. And so over time, my philosophy's totally shifted, and I still stand by music's for everyone, but what in music is for everyone specifically has changed. And so this project was a summation of that. I used Caldecott award-winning book, Martin's Big Words, as the foundation for this project. And what we wanted to do is we read through how Dr. Martin Luther King's words have really driven change through the civil rights era and still to this day. Excuse me. And then looking at his big words, what other words help drive a civil rights movement to make changes in our law, to make changes in our society for the betterment of people of color. And we looked at civil rights music specifically. We looked at it in depth and talked about the value and the importance of lyrics and how they can drive a message. We looked at the value of what it means to be someone who writes a piece of music as a composer. So we're in third grade. The children have just learned, I'm old school, recorder. And we've gotten them to understand and know a little bit how music works. They're starting to put to practice that, okay, I see a piece of paper with some symbols on it, and I can take that now and I can put it on this flute and I can make music happen. So I wanted to take it to the next step. Let's write our own music. Let's sit down. Let's get the concepts going. Okay, let's look at what's important here. So at this school particularly, it's a responsive classroom school. Basically our motivation for driving student behavior, our motivation for basically character, just character building, I guess you would call it, is called CARES. And it's cooperation, assertion, responsibility, empathy, and self-control. And so those were things that were identifiable among my third grade students. They understood what those words meant. They've been put into practice. It's universal across the school. It's universal as they get older and they move onward up into new grade levels. And so that was something I knew we needed to bring to the music composition. And so using this example of big words in the civil rights movement in the era of music, culturally responsive practice says we've got to make it about our population and who we teach. So my population was predominantly white. We had several students of color, high socioeconomic status, and I knew that we needed to first bring down a big concept into a very particularly specific concept of simple notation, simple lyric writing, and a message that's meaningful within our lyrics. And that was the whole goal of this project. So this was a music composition project. It lasted about 3 weeks. We started by coming up with simple melodic tunes. We put those to the xylophones. I let them, they're very attached to their iPads right now. So we also got to play around a little bit on Chrome Music Lab. We got to take our iPads and learn a little bit more about guitar. What's the one? Apple's
GarageBand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we used several different vehicles to kind of create this melodic line. And the kids were given very specific instructions of, how many quarter notes they could use. The note needed to end on a pentatonic C, those kinds of things were very simple, but where they got to start taking agency over their learning was you get to pick your theme, but your theme has to represent one of these CARES traits. So they got to pick cooperation as their theme, or they got to pick assertion, responsibility, empathy, self-control. Down the line, after looking at the data in front of me and all these projects laying before me, most of the kids evenly split kind of got to choose. And it was amazing to see kind of what kids came up with. They knew that they had the tools to write a simple melodic line. They had the tools to write a poetic lyric to go with it. And now they had a foundation of what it looks like in a big movement like the Civil Rights era, and how we can make a movement happen within our own classroom and in our own grade level at our own school. And so that was what we did. 3 weeks. We're getting a lot of frustrated and very, let's just say the kids wanted to give up right away. I think this was maybe the first time, I was still new to the district, where they got to have agency over their learning. We come from a very traditional model of speak at them, give them the slide, show them the concepts, or show them on the recorder how to do it, repeat after me. And, in my time overseas, the stress on conceptual-based understanding, inquiry-based learning was a huge thing I took away. And it's still something I apply to my philosophy in the classroom. And I knew these kids also needed a safe space to make mistakes. They needed to know that we can, okay, let's try this out. I have Mr. Z to help me out if I make a mistake. And he's going to help me if I make a mistake. Creating a space for safety, for failure. And try again, and we went from frustrated to aha moments where kids had finally got their melodic tune down. They were able to play it on the xylophone. They were able to sing and hum it. They didn't have any words yet. And then they were able to say, okay, I'm starting to understand this. And next thing you know, they're writing down beautiful poetry and they're applying that rhythmically. And all of a sudden you have a child who's sitting here with an important message, who's written a piece of music that follows all the basic rules of music. And we were able to share and showcase those at the end of the project with each other. They went from being shy and scared and I'm never going to be able to do this to, oh my gosh, I've written my own piece of music and I am a music composer. And so it was a great project. Just to share with you a couple of lyrics from the project that I thought were really significant. This one comes from a student. Her name was Michaela. Her foundation was cooperation. That was the character trait she was passionate about. And she wrote this little piece. I'll speak it in rhythm because she also wrote it to a rhythm. And it was like this: working with friends, helping with friends, wait for your turn, helping them learn. So, obviously this sounds, very trivial. It sounds very third grade, but this was all Michaela. I had nothing to say about anything. She was able to put it in a way that she was able to put it to rhythm. And she was able to play it on the xylophone and sing it for us at the end of the year. And it was fantastic. Another student, David, he focused on a different word. He focused on the word, oh, not David, I was wrong. Ollie focused on the word empathy. And his poem was, and then he put it to music, make someone feel good. Empathy, you should. So we got some really cool things going on with grade 3 this year, where they were able to take charge of their learning. They were able to understand a concept that's big. And then what does it look like for us? What is the model that represents us specifically as a cohort of third grade students? And then we were able to drive it and perform it. And, when we went in to measure, particularly in the research side of things, I wanted to know 2 things. Does the student understand culturally responsiveness in his project or her project? Does the student know about the concepts I want them to know about? Rhythm, notation, melody. And it's a great foundation because this is all in grade 3. And where can it be taken as we understand more and more concepts? Can we add harmony to this? Can we add multiple verses to this? So it really was a great tool and a foundation. Another part of the practice for this project that I really wanted to see, I wanted to reflect on their experience. And so I also asked them, I went in and I said, listen, I want you to just tell me honestly, what was this experience like for you? And so the kids were able to weigh in on a lot of different things, but I was able to quantify the data. And then I was able to show, I've got it here, some very cool statistics about this project. So when we were looking at the data, we found 79 out of 85 students had an appropriate level of understanding with the prompt, why did Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. use words to make change? They responded positively. They didn't respond negatively. And they were able to touch on why it was an important part of their project for writing music specifically. I got 86 submissions total for the assignment. 80 of those students showed an accurate understanding of why cares was important for positive change based on their musical lyrics. And then out of the 86 projects, 66 students met the expectation in their musicianship acknowledgement to meet the standard of music. And it resulted in 76.74% of students meeting the standard. And so what we can see right away is it can be quantified in such a way that you really can measure this. And you can see that not only are you creating a project that students can have ownership over, that they have created themselves, that they can say, I am now a music composer. They also have data in front of you. You can quantify and measure in a way that shows you are driving concepts that are lifelong, but also are meeting the standard. So it was a really great project. And then one particular question at the end of the project, I said, did this project inspire you to write more music in the future? And we had 70% of kids out of the 86 kids that were surveyed say, yes, I want to do more of this. You're not going to reach them all. You're going to try to reach them all. Over time, you probably will reach more than that. But I was in a school district that was very sports heavy in terms of its values. And I was able to win, and particularly boys, I was able to win most of my boys over to the music side. And it was great. They were so proud of the project that they had done. And they knew that they had a talent inside of them that they didn't know otherwise, all because of that component of agency where they got to take charge of their learning. So great project, easy to measure, and a great opportunity for educators, particularly music educators, to say, okay, what's important here? Music education, particularly in and of itself, is extremely important. But what can we build that's lifelong as we bring them through our education programs, particularly music education, and inspire them to create more music based on their own personal stories and their own personal triumphs and their goals, and looking at, okay, these are important values that we want to continue to instill, and we want to do it through the lens of music. And I can do it because I can compose now. Mm-hmm. So it was a great project. The kids had a great time. We had a few kids that were obviously shy in presenting. By the end of it, though, they took that risk and they stood up in front of the class and they did it. And, I don't think had I just delivered a lesson on composition, made them do a few worksheets, they would have gotten there in the same way. That's something to measure, though. So I can't say it until it's measurable. So, but yeah, as a part of what I do, I'm going to continue this journey of teacher research and look at what's really driving conceptual learning and these ideas that we want to instill in our children, but also driving their musicianship towards excellence with a high standard and quality.
Yeah. So. I think something that Theresa and I really enjoy out of this podcast is that we get to watch people build what they have, and it's so different because every situation is different. Pass the baton, our book can't tell you how to do this because everybody has their own environment and their own kids and their own experiences. And it's just really cool to hear when you were saying, what can I build with what I had? Because I think sometimes we step back and think, whoa, that project is really cool. I could never do it. It was so big. And to hear you say they knew recorder, they knew, we had this book, big words. You took the things they had, right? And you just, helped them learn within things that were familiar to them. So, it's somebody else is not going to be able to do the exact same thing, but they could do something similar, but because it's got to be all within what do your kids know? What do your kids feel? What do your kids want? And
confession time, composition and driving music literacy is and always will be one of those opportunities for me to grow, but also an opportunity for me to, that was my biggest insecurity as an educator going into music education. I was always I was an ear trained person. I was that kid that picked up the piano because I learned by ear, and I, understanding the rules of composition, I always knew that, oh my goodness, how am I going to make this interesting? This is the hard. That is the hardest for children because it is not as fun. It's what we need to get to where we want to go to have fun. But this was an opportunity to kind of disguise that work in a way and through the vessel of, I own this project. Mm-hmm. I own my own learning. Mm-hmm. I have agency over this, idea. And I find this particular value important. And I want to tell my friends, and I want to share this, and I want to perform at recess a little, show for my friends. And it just builds and builds and builds. So those of you who think this was a big project, it was, but it wasn't something that was it wasn't something that everybody can do it. We got to step out of our own insecurities. And it was an area in which I wanted to grow. I wanted to really understand myself as an educator, and okay, my kids are learning. I'm doing what I need to do. I can put my own insecurities aside, and I can really jump forward and really take off with lots of different things going on at once. So
I think it was also fair to say, because I've seen that in my elementary classroom too, when the kids push back a little because they're not used to this kind of experience, right? They're kind of like, well, I'm not a composer, those kinds of thoughts they have, or just like you said, the level of frustration, not heavy frustration, but, a little frustration there, which again, I feel like in the, ups and downs of learning, you got to have a little low to really appreciate the high at the end when you're like, I made this is mine, but it's very true. Like our kids, when we put them in these newer situations, they are going to have a little bit of whoa, you're not going to give me the right answer. What is the answer? I don't know how to do this. And, but like you said, then they own they figure it out with your help. And what a powerful message that is, that they've, come out on the other end owning their learning.
And you know, I'm somebody who still thinks that the teacher needs to model, and the teacher
Sure.
needs to be there to challenge in a way that, you know, in this project, I did spend time with each and every individual kid. I sat at my desk and they came up to me, they showed me, and I said, okay, what about this? What about this? You know, it does require you to have that individual relationship with all your students. But you know, one student in particular, she came up to me, she says, I don't know, I just can't do this. And I said, yes, you can. And she goes, oh. I said, look at this, look at this, look at this. Okay. Think about all the things that we've just learned. Try again, give it another 5 minutes, and then come back to me. She came back in 5 minutes and she came up with it. You know, so they do. They just need that little push, that level of insecurity needs to just be challenged a little bit in a way where they say, you know what? I don't care what the product is, as long as I know you're doing your best, and allowing for them to feel safe in making those mistakes, and allowing for them to, okay, I can erase and I can continue to do this. They really walked away new musicians.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I also feel like too, with the Pro Music Lab, the Bard instruments, the recorders, like that kind of offers different supports for kids, right?
Absolutely.
If I'm like, I can't do that, I might need Pro Music Lab and touch a few buttons and hit play and it plays it for me. And now I've created something. Where there's another kid who's like, out of the way, I want my Bard instrument because I'm going to make something. You know what I mean? Like, but it helps kids along the way, and they're going to pick what, you know, what method they want to figure it out with.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was thinking, you really, in a lot of ways, did set them up for success by giving them certain parameters, you know, using these pitches, using these rhythm, like specific things like that. I think sometimes we get in this mindset that, oh, well, if they're going to be creative, we need to tell them just make something.
Right.
Like that's not going to work. You need to give them some things to work with, allow them to go beyond if they're ready, but give them that structure so that they have something. Like structure is okay in a creative project, as long as you're not ending up with cookie cutters, right? We don't want to see the same exact thing from every student in the end, but you're giving them those tools so that they're going to be successful.
And, you know, initially I did have some students, they had copied verbatim my example on the board, you know, and they said, okay, is this good? And I said, no, that's mine. What are you doing? Just copy mine. That's my work. I want to see your work, you know. And then that was maybe the first time they were like, oh, I have to create my own? I'm allowed? Wow, okay. You know, and went back and created a really great piece of music. So yeah, I've been in classrooms and in past schools where structure, that component of structure didn't exist. It was truly just formulate questions and let kids explore. And I always felt the product wasn't of high excellence. And so when we give them parameters, when we allow for creativity to happen within a structure that makes sense, you know, and culturally responsive, you know, practices in our classrooms, you know, also says it needs to match our population of students. You know, it needs to start where we're at in our community and what that looks like specifically, and then go from there. Really makes a difference in the outcome of the product. So.
All right. So we've talked about empowering our students all the time on our podcast, but how did your participation in this research program empower you as an educator?
Oh, well, I have a lot of policies that I'm ready to change, and I'm ready to do it with research. You know, you can't change policy unless we have the research and the tools to back it up, particularly when it comes to the value of music education and the arts as a part of STEM learning. You know, we do have STEAM. It isn't as common. It's out there, kind of. You might find it more in the private sector than the public sector, but why are we here still? Why are we valuable? What is it about us as music educators specifically that needs to still be a part of our students and their learning. That's my reason for doing this project, but also why I want to continue in research, because we need to start looking at, okay, people throw that out all the time. The research says that classical music makes for a better student. You know what? Nobody actually believes that. If they truly believe that, and if our school districts actually believed in that, and I'm speaking very, specifically general music, public education in America. But, okay, if that is true, then why aren't we more a part of the narrative? Why aren't we more a part of the policy that says this is foundational? Music education is getting cut all across the nation. We're devoting more time to literacy, and we're devoting more time to mathematics, and we're not taking away from anywhere except the arts. And for me, it's going to be the catalyst for me to hopefully show, wait a minute, hold on, here's a study that says if you do this, look what happens. If you take music out of the equation, what is that going to say about our society in the future? What's it going to say? And that was my big passion about this whole idea around cultural responsiveness, because music is and has and will always be a vehicle for people to promote positive change. But we've got to be able to do it and teach it in our classrooms, and not be so crunched for time because they've cut off our contact time. So that's where I want to go with it in the future. Mm-hmm. I want to be the advocate. I always wanted to be an advocate for music education, and not without its bumps in the roads. For a long time, I wanted to leave the profession. I wanted to I just don't feel respected. Maybe I need to go into English language arts. Maybe I need to, and then I kind of said, no, you know what you're doing as a music teacher. You know why this is important. Start being the change agent for how we see music and how culture and society appreciates it. Eventually we're going to be in empty concert halls. Kennedy Center is not going to have musicians to put on stage. I think we're already seeing that a little bit because, not every state in the union has music education as a part of its public education program. And so that's my inspiration. That's my goal. And that's where I want to be. I want to bring back, COVID was an opportunity for us to do that. We missed out on the arts for 3 years, and you see what's going on around us, and we really need music back in the equation to really drive peace and to drive, conversations, that are respectful and caring. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I wanted to do this project. And that's where I want to go with research in my career in the future, particularly now in Iowa. So
awesome. So we like to give the listeners something like a little snippet of something they can do tomorrow. What is something that you would suggest people could do tomorrow, either in this aspect of teacher research or culturally responsive practices or student agency or any of those things? What would be that one little, try this tomorrow?
Okay. I have a lot of different ideas about what that looks like, but I think at the core, what every teacher could do starting tomorrow, based on everything that we've talked about today, start asking questions, open-ended. Ask your students about their interests. Start asking students about what they love about music. Keep the narrative open, keep the conversation open. Have students and answer in a way that's related to their own love and interest in music. And if that has to mean that, the only music that they know and love is what they've listened to in the radio that day, or what they've seen on Netflix or, on television, Disney, etc., start with that and then bring more in. You get so much more when a student has a vested interest in you asking them about who they are. And getting to know them on a level where, okay, I know that this student over here loves rap. I know this student over here loves soccer and hasn't even talked about music, and okay, let's see if I can pull some soccer music. I'll find it. If not, I'll create it. Let's see if I can find, okay, I've got a rap song. Here we go. Let's do it. Getting to know our students, start asking them questions about who they are and who they are as musicians, and treating them as such. Treating all my kids as musicians, Mm-hmm. Don't treat them as students in music class. They are musicians. They can be musicians. So I think that's a good way to start asking questions. Leave them open-ended. No yes or no's. Let them explain themselves. It's a great way to get to know your kids and a great way to understand, hey, okay, there are parts of music that I can enjoy. He recognizes that as my teacher. I mean, I could do rap in this classroom if I want to. Awesome. And then, then you got buy-in. And once you got the buy-in, you're good to go and you can just take off. So.
Yeah, I think just like asking questions, but really the basis is getting to know your kids better, building relationships, absolutely. Right? Yeah. And that, like, if the in for that one kid is we're going to compose about soccer, he's in or she's in, right? Yeah. Like, but you had to know that to help get, open the door for them. So absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Well, I'm a little old-fashioned. I do have a Twitter handle. It is at Mr. Z's Music Tweets. So Mr. Z.S. Music Tweets. That is my Twitter handle. So I'm going to be covering more of what I do in teacher research next year on this handle. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Zachary D. Rush. You'll find me on LinkedIn. And excuse me. And if you need to get a hold of me in any other way, you can talk to one of you guys. So
yeah, totally.
Put me in touch. I would love to have more conversations, particularly those who may be struggling to get those kids to buy in to what we do in our classrooms. And yeah, I would love to be a part of that conversation.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, taking the time. We really enjoyed it and loved the conversation.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.